Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to USA Global TV and Radio. I'm Dr. JACALYN KERBECK, and our show today is Aging Gracefully with Humor. We are going to welcome our guest who's joining us from Canada, Dr. Stephen Hobbs, in just a moment. Until then, I'm going to bring out the star of our show, Mr. Red O'Loughlin. Let's welcome him and see what he's been up to. Hello.
Good morning, Doctor.
Morning.
It's a little early in the morning here, but as we were talking backstage with the other doctor, it's even earlier where he's at. So anyway, but we're getting on pretty well this morning, actually.
Fantastic. We've actually had people interviewed at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, because we are a global platform. So I do appreciate it when people get up early. And, you know, Red, as you recall, I'm going to be turning 60 on Sunday. When we think about aging and aging gracefully, it's not an easy thing to do. Even at 59, I'm just looking at what's not where it used to be and things that I'm not remembering that I used to. And it just comes upon us, and we have to seize the day and look for the positives.
Well, it's not easy, but it's going to happen anyway.
Or it's not, right?
Well, or it's not, but then again, it's the stuff in between. It's like my dad used to think the worst thing in life was dying. And I tell him, I says, Dad, you don't want somebody changing your diaper for the last 5 years of your life. I said, that's not a way to age gracefully or any other way. It's just, that's not a good quality of life to have. We want to have our faculties. We'd like to have a lot of things working reasonably well, maybe not perfectly, but certainly well enough that we're not incumbent upon somebody else just mundane tasks.
Yes, that's a very good point. And for people who are joining us for the first time, I'm going to spotlight you. If you could give a brief introduction about yourself and the work that you do as a longevity strategist, as a book publisher, as an author, as a distinguished Toastmaster, et cetera, et cetera. Tell our audience a little bit about you.
Thank you, Dr. JACALYN. I am a writer. I write almost every single day. My specialty is longevity, health and wellness, age-related issues. My first love was chemistry back in sophomore in high school. I fell in love with it, got a degree in it, and then immediately got an invitation to Vietnam. So I never really got a chance to practice it until about 10 years ago when my wife came down with breast cancer. And I was looking for ways to help counter some of the side effects from her chemo drugs. And all of a sudden, I fell back in love with chemistry. I had been working on self-improvement and motivation, wrote a couple books in that area, was speaking around the country. And then all of a sudden, my chemistry passion came back. And so I researched the human body at the cellular level, chemically speaking. I look for cause and effect relationships. Treat a cause, fix a problem. Treat a symptom, and you'll always be treating those symptoms. So that's what I research. That's what I write about. That's what I speak about on a regular basis. I published a book maybe about 2 weeks ago on understanding the causes of Alzheimer's, where I go into each of the different pathways that the disease progresses through the body. I'm also a book coach and book publisher. I've worked with Dr. JACALYN on her last 6 books, 2 of which have been #1 bestsellers, and her 4 most recent ones have been #1 new releases. And so I work in that particular area. I help new authors get their books published. And I'm also a broadcast host here on the USA Global TV and Radio Network. Back to you, Dr. JACALYN.
Thank you very much. So I'm super excited to welcome our guest who's joining us from Canada. His name is Dr. Stephen Hobbs, and he's a facilitative mentor. Let's find out what that is. Welcome to the show.
Hello there.
Hello. Thank you for
Howdy.
joining us and from oh so dark early there in
Yeah.
Canada.
Yeah, it's just breaking. The sun is just going to start to break. So that's wonderful.
You know, it's interesting, Stephen, and also Red. I found that when I wake up and the sun is out, I just feel so much better. I just feel full of hope and the possibilities of what could be. How about you, Stephen? What are your thoughts?
I agree wholeheartedly with you. Being here in Canada, and as we move a little farther north, that little bit longer winters when the sun's not out, you start to feel it. But when the summer comes, then it's around for a much longer time. And there's some of those evenings when I'm taking long walks, and that's just wonderful. So here's to the sun. Bring it on.
Absolutely. Can you share with us what is a facilitative mentor and what do you do?
For me, let's go to mentor, then I'll come back to facilitative mentor. Mentor is someone who interacts with another mentee, protege, there's other names for it, to answer questions of the mentee so they can tap in to, in my case, my lived experience. The facilitative component is there is because over the years, I've done a lot of facilitative work around the world. And I started to realize is that one of the other really core elements of mentoring is to understand how to draw out of the mentee ideas, insights, interpretations, investigations, the information that's necessary to have the conversation. And therefore, I blended the two of them together, and I call myself a facilitative mentor. And that seems to stick. It's the best way to describe how I go about doing my work.
Is
Thank
that
you.
also what used to be called a Socratic method, if I'm remembering it right?
Yeah, there's an element of that that is in there. It's this notion of the quality of your questions, quality of your life, that kind of connection that's there.
Mm-hmm.
And I also find that if you formulate a question, you're identifying the issue. If you have an issue, frame it as a question, and that opens up this collaborative conversation known as facilitative mentoring that I do.
Okay.
And if we look at your banner, which you did type, so I just want to zone in on this, wealthmovement.com, it's spelled differently than what we think of with wealth. Can you share a little bit about that?
For sure. About 30 years ago, when I went into my second iteration of being an entrepreneur, I had come back from working overseas and working in situations which they call war. And I made a promise to myself that I would do whatever I could to find another way in which to interact with one another. And wealth came to mind because it was sort of the opposite in a sense, or complementary, depending how you want to look at it, to wealth with an A. But the wealth that I speak about is about well-being and well-living to the nth degree, and the movement that's necessary for you to understand your well-being, the steps that you take, and the well-living that you do with others, the movement that you take. And therefore, the wealth movement was born, and it was in response to a commitment, a promise that I made, what was it, about 30 some years ago, that I would do what I can to sort of support this world in a different way.
Earlier we were talking, and you said that you were in Africa and the South Sudan and Kenya or whatever that area that was there was a wartime. Is that where this kind of thought came from? You said 30 years ago.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was a roadblock in Uganda. Roadblock is a pile of rocks in the middle of the road, and if it's during the day and soldiers around, that means stop. So we did. My driver rolled down the windows. I rolled down mine just to make sure that everything was open to the soldier. The soldier walked up with the machine gun, poked the machine gun through the window, and it touched the tip of my nose. And I went, oh boy, here we go. And we entered into a conversation while my driver and the a soldier were interacting. And I just noticed the machine gun started to wobble. The soldiers behind this soldier were laughing. There was all this happening. And this is all taking place in about 3 minutes. And the machine gun went back out the window, told to move forward. And as we drove on, I asked my driver, how old was that soldier? And he said, well, she's probably around 14 to 16. And I realized at that moment I had entered her workplace, and she was attempting to save face with holding that machine gun, which is quite heavy, which is why it was wobbling, listening to all the other soldiers laughing. And I said to myself as I drove away from that checkpoint, I am going to do something so that no young person in particular would pick up a machine gun. And I think of that as when you give up on your words, you pick up a weapon. And I said, I will use my words instead. So, Red, I can understand the notion of writing. That's something I do. And with that promise, I have been fulfilling it and fulfilling it and fulfilling it. And thus, facilitative mentor.
So in reality, you're giving them a better weapon, a weapon of words.
In a sense, yeah, there is that phrase, and I always get it mixed up, pen, sword, something's mightier. I think the pen's mightier than the sword kind of idea. And I believe that to be so true. And I have been writing, was it going on 50 some years? I started my first poem about 50 years ago, and here we are. Well, actually a little more than 55 years ago. Yeah.
What an incredible story. Thank you for sharing that. Stephen, as you know, and Red, as you know, people are living longer. And as we're living longer, we get an opportunity to have a whole new chapter added to our book. And for many people, that is a time of excitement. But for others, it's kind of, oh no, I didn't think I'd still be here. I don't have enough money. There's all these questions that come into play. So what are some tips or some advice that you can give to our audience about how to age gracefully and without fear?
I guess the best one that I'll start with is my realization of that dash that's between your birth year and your transition year. So I usually talk about transition rather than death year. And a lot of people say, well, that dash represents your life. And I said, if that's the case, guess what? I'm going to add as many dashes into that between those 2 years that I can. And that's something that I have done. And picking up on the word in the intention of this broadcast, gracefully. And gracefully, I associate with it being movement and the gracefulness of that movement. And therefore, I do that whenever I can, while I'm walking, when I'm writing. It's just finding the grace in it, that in a sense, the intention. And I guess at the core of all of this is, what is your legacy intention? And one of the activities that I do is I help people figure out there's a word in you that's for the world. And once you understand what that word is, then you can use that to unfold the chapters, if I pick up on this metaphor of writing and books, that you can use. And after a while, you start finding out there's a couple of other words. And before you know it, you've written something.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, there are several things in there as I'm talking about longevity and some of the programs I do and some of the things I write, the movement and the purpose in life. And just several things there very, very quickly. You summarized a lot of things that are very important for our longevity, for a nice, healthy lifespan. But I think you also include more in understanding why we're doing this. You use the word legacy. Would you go a little bit more exactly what your definition of legacy is so people fully understand?
Sure. Legacy is about the useful whats that you gift others so that they can learn something from your lived experience. And the useful whats are your time, effort, and money. And how you put those into play. In other words, how do you dance gracefully with time, effort, and money? that is an indication of the life that we live, this well-being, this well-living. And when we think of it as a gift, the use of this time, effort, and money, then it comes from the heart. It's wholehearted, versus sometimes I think when you give a present, it's sort of from the head. Oh, I need to get a present for the person that's a birthday. But a gift is this wholehearted way of looking at it. And lived experience goes back to the mentoring component. And I think all of us have this lived experience. All of us have something that we can write about, as even if it's an autobiography or something like that, or writing the poems and stories and that, and to bring that all forward. And legacy just unfolds from all of that.
Okay. Yeah, there's several different definitions of legacy, about giving things to people, about writing an autobiography, and I just needed a little clarity so I could figure out which direction we need to go in. But no, I think you are absolutely correct. We have a lot of things in our lives, and we should share them so that other people can benefit. I mean, how many times have we failed at something and then figured out a way to okay, if you do this, it'll work. And we do that almost every day with some aspect of technology that we're working with. It's unbelievable sometimes what if I had just known that a little while ago. And so I think what you're doing is extremely important, very much so.
Yeah,
Dr.
absolutely.
Jacalyn's getting ready to share a little bit of her experience in her next book that we've been talking about. We talked about last night. So we have these little things that a month ago we weren't even thinking that. Then all of a sudden, I really have something that I need to get out. And those are the things that you're helping people to do. So if somebody came to you and says, how do I do this? What's the process you use?
Well, I'll do it this way. It's a very simple way. Is often we think of, we have an upset that is in our lives, and that sort of spurs us on to something else. And if you have an upset, well, then let's flip it around and do the setup, which is the conversation about what's possible, and just exploring it and the basis of it, mapping it out, having a little fun, looking for that word for the world. Is there a metaphor you want to interact with? Just to have that conversation. And the reason I do that is, if you take the word conversation and you flip the S and the V, it becomes conservation. And therefore, if you're having a conversation, then there's a conservation of ideas and feelings and thoughts. And if you bring those together, when you set this up, you're able to stride forward. Some people say step forward. I use the word stride. Maybe that's because, from a bit of a humorous side, I'm 6'7", so I tend to stride, not step. And so that's why I bring it up that way. And then I just take them through the next level. But really, it's that first collection, right? It's curating what it is that is your life. Do you have a lot of dashes, or do you want to just talk about one dash in there? These are the things that we have a conversation about.
6'7". Wow.
You can't tell where I'm sitting, right? But yeah. Well, there's a very short little story. I used to work in the recreation field, and a little one came up to me, and she said, "Can I call you tall for the short of it?" And I just went out of, it was so beautiful. And that was many years ago. And I just always remembered it. And it's one of those things that I sort of say to myself, well, I'm just going to call you tall for the short of it today. And off we go, type thing.
So that's a hyphen, not a dash.
Yeah.
A question that I have is, when I think back to movies that have stood out over various decades, and we think about people getting older, we would see someone in a nursing home, or someone is in a chair watching cartoons, and there's not a lot of movement. And you were talking about the importance of movement, and also about it's important to get out in nature and to socialize, and so many things. But yet, for many years, the way that we were portrayed in humanity as aging was kind of like, oh, just put them in a room, put on a television, turn it really loud, and come visit them once a week, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
how has that evolved?
Well, I believe that instead of looking at the use of the word elderly, it's to look at the word elder. And one of the things that I believe is so true is that I invite olders to be elders. And if you're going to be an elder, then it's share your legacy, serve as a mentor, walk with nature. I give these connections of how to keep moving it forward. It's unfortunate that a lot of people saw movement as being something that could become a problem. I didn't understand that as we became older and we're aging, and people would say, well, I don't have the same mobility and all that I had. And I go, really? Oh, that's interesting. Have you actually given it a go again? Have you actually walked, even if it was to the end of the hall? Have you gotten up out of your chair? Have you just walked around your garden? Have you just encouraging. It's unfortunate that we sort of put people into boxes when they get older, and I'm being metaphoric there as well. The idea of closing people in, and I just find that that's not for me. And I'm 69. I'll be starting my 70th rotation around the sun next year, and this guy is going to keep walking, taking long walks, because that dog needs to be walked.
Bravo.
Okay, so boxes and closing in, you use your words very well with regard to metaphors and whatever. So
Thank you.
Congratulate you on that one.
So I really feel that each day is a gift, and when we look at this beautiful landscape that we have behind us, even though it's we're not actually here in Africa, or there in Africa, I should say, you have taken landscape, that word landscape, and you've added another word onto it, actionist. What is a landscape actionist?
Well, the notion of landscape and portrait, and again, over time with my mapping, I started to understand, well, I can draw a portrait, which is sort of the 8.5 across and 11 down. But also the landscape is when you do a 90-degree shift and you're doing 11 across and 8.5 down. And I started to think about that. Well, okay, I could draw a tree or I could draw the forest. And so I started to say to myself, okay, well, when I'm in my conversation with others, which is it? Am I looking at the well-being through the portrait or the well-living through the landscape? And so it was a way for me to just be minding what's taking place. And then I started to take a look at, well, what is it that I would call it? Yes, I'm a mentor, but what else might I identify through? And because I am very much involved with the nature, the environment, I started to go, well, people call themselves advocates. Some people are activists. And a friend of mine said, well, could you become an actionist? In other words, just be involved in taking action, movement, action, just doing it from that perspective. And I went, you know, that's really true. And when I sort of had a conversation with myself one morning with my journals, I called myself a landscape actionist. It sort of stuck. I like it. And that's where it all came from. So I just offer that to people. They may want to become an actionist. Maybe they want to become an activist, an advocate, an explainer, elucidator, whatever you want to call it. Do you want to do a portrait? Do you want to do a landscape? These are just part of that set up kind of before you stride forward.
You hit several key issues there with the word landscape. I have a good friend here in Houston who is a hypnotist as part of his job. He works a lot with PTSD, and he starts out with the regular portrait, as you talk about, of whatever scene that's causing problem. But then he expands it into a landscape. And then sometimes he'll bring the left part up and then shift the back part. So he's actually shifting the landscape because it affects the brain a little differently. And then he'll move it the other way, or he'll change from color to black and white, or he'll fade part of it. And it's interesting, just the mere rotating of a portrait to a landscape affects our brains so much differently. And
Yes.
and when you mention that, you kind of reminded me of I need to get him on the show, by the way.
Yeah.
But that landscape thing is a really effective tool. I can imagine that you've had a lot of success when you get people to start thinking in a broader way of their life and what they offer.
For sure. If you can stay with the pictures of yourselves, let me use an example here. I could do a portrait of that giraffe. I could do a portrait of the acacia tree. I could do a portrait of Mount Kilimanjaro. But in your picture is a landscape. And therefore, when you start to look at it, I can look at one part, another part, another part. But hang on a minute, those aren't parts, those are holes. But then there's the whole of the holes. And what we've been given in our lives is we deal with this part, that part, that part, these words, part. And okay, it makes sense. Okay, I've got the screw, which is a part of putting that engine together, right? Or that nail for that piece of wood to build that building. Well, when we start talking about our lives, start sharing about our lives, each element of that is not this part of my life. I talk about, well, there is this whole of my life, this whole of my life, this whole of my life. So depending on, is it the whole of portrait or the whole of landscape, and weaving those together. And that's a really important word, Red, is this notion of the weaving that takes place between those, the turning of it.
So it's the sewing together of the dashes.
Yes. Great way to do it. Yeah.
You two are on the same page. I love it.
Well, it's probably page 37, because that tends to be the number that people throw up when they don't know what they're doing, right? Oh, it's 37. Yeah.
Yeah, we're both old guys.
Yeah.
Now, a question that I have, this actually just happened twice. I went with someone in my family to a doctor and said to the doctor, should we make an appointment to come back next year or 6 months? And the doctor said, well, that person's age, it's not really necessary, it's up to them. And I thought, oh, I wonder how many people you're giving that information to. That's really kind of disheartening. So the reason I bring it up is the work that you're doing is so heart opening, and it's so encouraging. And yet I'm wondering, since I heard this from two doctors, how many people in the medical field are, or even other fields, giving that kind of disheartening information to people to really take away their spirit.
Yes. Well, I just met Dr. Outdoors. She's actually a doctor, and she is an endurance runner. She is also very much a specialist in her medicine. She calls herself Dr. Outdoors, and she prescribes time in nature. And that's actually something that is gaining momentum in the medical field, is get outside, and they'll actually prescribe it. And that is happening. That's unfortunate when that takes place, because again, I think that medical practitioner has been boxed in, and it's unfortunate that happens. I think if we're given more insights and possibilities of where we can go to be able to get this movement, to be able to understand how to live our life. That's why I tend to use the word transition rather than talk about the death. It's the transition, the movement that takes place. And if we get medical providers to become more Dr. Outdoors and to share a little bit more about how to take a look at living with well-being and well-living, I'm there, and I'd be happy to have conversations with them.
What would be the 2 or 3 things that you would highly recommend to somebody, say maybe reaching 60 or 65 years of age, that they really need to be aware of, maybe not necessarily educated, but certainly aware of, that if they're going to make some changes, even incrementally, what's really effective?
The story I would bring up here is the sense of safety. and it's about the safe systems and safer practices. When we engage with safety as a mindset and we start to understand it, and I'll give three components to that to flesh this out a little bit, is that one of the outcomes of our awareness of safety, safe systems, safer practices, is growth, learning, development. And if we're doing our growth, learning, and development, one of the outcomes is safety. And if we reframe it that way, then it becomes such a beautiful way in which to go about this movement, the things that we do. And there's three things that I encourage people to do. One is to think about what is your preparation checklist. And for some people, it might be the to-do list, okay, a bucket list. It could be that way of looking at it. But where I'm going is preparation checklist. Oh, I'm going to be doing this today and this today and this today. So how am I going to prepare myself for that? And being here in Canada in the winter, better have some good boots on and a good jacket, even though I see people standing at bus stops with thin jackets and sneakers on and things like that. But again, that's their decision. But the preparation checklist, and if you're going to go in the out of doors, do you have what's necessary? Which brings up the next one, which is the prevention backpack, and thinking it metaphorically and literally. What are you carrying with you that's going to ensure your safety? And I think to your point earlier about symptom and dealing with symptom, Red, that you mentioned, I actually instructed wilderness remote first aid for 25 years, wrote one of the books on it, and was one of the instructor trainers of this course. And that safety sense came in through that, which brings up the third one, which is really about practice every day. And let me just, if you're going to go for walks in the out of doors, then go for walks during the day, because not every day you go into the out of doors, but practice your walking. And one great way is, if you got a set of stairs, practice walking up your stairs to get your mobility. There's things like that. So the idea I bring forward is the preparation checklist, the prevention backpack, and practice every day.
It's interesting that you chose the middle one to be prevention, because I think that's a critical one, particularly as we get older. Our brain cells are not necessarily fully functioning. We might be a little deficient in this or that, and it affects the way we think, the way we actually move. And, from a safety perspective, the same thing you've done for the last 20 years, you do today, and you fall and trip and you break something. And if we're not aware of it, that this is something as we just don't take for granted. I think what you hit on was super, super important because it's not one of those things we ever think about.
Yeah, it's like the other day I stood up and turned, and all of a sudden it was sort of like felt like my hip wasn't there, and I did the stutter dance. Whoa, hang on a minute, I get back here. And I went, oh, right.
It's very true. I went out for a run the other day, and I haven't been running regularly for a number of years. And I just said to myself, what are you doing? You could trip. You could hurt your hips. Like, you're too old to be doing this. But then I thought, I don't know, am I selling myself short? It's kind of hard to know. Like, you want to be safe. You want to do the things that you need to do, because if you do get hurt, it's going to take longer to recover. But how do we play that mental? It's sort of like a fine line between what we used to do and we still want to do it, but should we do it?
That's that practice every day. Is that if you're not running every day, then there are ways to practice it. And that could even be walking the stairs, whatever. Sometimes it can just be even a mental, I'm going to go for my run today, and just remember and feel it and just bring it back into the awareness of your body, right? That mental component, that's so important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to keep running. That's for sure.
Yeah, at 6'7", I don't do it as much. That's why I do up and down walking in the hills. That's much better for me now. So
yeah.
But the movement, the rate of movement is also a key metric of longevity. Those people who walk a little faster tend to live 5, 10, 15, even 20 years longer than those people who just dawdle along. And it's a choice of how fast we want to walk. But part of it, from what you said earlier, is the safety in what we're doing.
Yes.
Because if we're not safe walking a little bit faster, then we add another dimension to something that can actually be a problem. But incrementally, you can increase it just a little bit, and it may only be maybe an extra inch in the stride. Just consciously being aware of it. So going back to Dr. JACALYN's, well, I haven't done this, I'm doing it now, and maybe there's something in between running and whatever. And so everything you're bringing up has some aspect of longevity attached to it, but not necessarily in the ways we think about it.
Yes. Well, when I walk, one of the things is I play the game of dance partner. In other words, I don't step on the roots of the trees. And therefore, it's not just the same stride each time. I sometimes may go up on the tip of my toes, or I might hit my heel. And what I'm attempting to do is not step on the roots, the exposed roots of the tree. And I call the trees my dance partners. And that's how I walk. And that's how I vary based on what you're sharing. And sometimes it's a stretch out, sometimes it's a little bit. It's just one of the ways that I did it, having fun, doing it gracefully.
Yeah. If we're working on a concrete sidewalk and we can see all the way to the end of the block and there's no disruptions, we're pretty safe at what we're doing. But if you're on a really bumpy, rocky road, I've had to concentrate literally on 2.5, 3 feet in front of me,
Yes.
just so I know that I'm not going to turn my ankle or something. And
yes,
it's something that most of us are unaware of until we're forced to be in there. And then we, even at that point in time, we don't look at what are the long-term problems that could be associated if I make a simple mistake, turning a knee, turning an ankle. It's interesting that as we get older, we just don't even take these things into account. We just kind of live in our old brain, our 24-year-old mind, and we're still doing those things, but we don't have the body that's going to respond to it.
for sure. And that's why when I stand up and I look down, I go, feet, stay with me. You're a long way from my head, I know, but stay with me.
Dr. Stephen, we have your website pulled up. I'd love to share it with our audience if that's okay with you.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, fantastic. So let me share the screen here. Okay, I'm over here. This is the right website?
That's the one.
All right, where shall I go over here?
Well, I think the best bet would go, if you just scroll down just a little bit, I think and just right there is one of the things that I have done is that I attempted to figure out what are the entry ways, what are the pathways into what it is that I do. And not everyone starts in the same spot. And whatever that noise is around them, the upset, how can we get them into the news? And what news do they want to partake of? And therefore, do you want to look at what it means to be a mentor? Do you want to look at legacy, nature, safety, experience? Which of these do you want to play with? And I call those my 5 main words. And I can actually stand on stage using my hand, these 5 words, and do an hour presentation and not even look sideways, giving you concepts and practices. Then there's the wealth movement because of what I'm talking about, but it's the stay found piece. That is going to become a signature course. The notion of people get lost as you get, this notion of aging, you get lost. And that's unfortunate. And it could be for any number of reasons. So I'm encouraging people to use a stay found approach rather than a get lost avoidance. And so the stay found, the signature course, that's what I will be bringing forward, which brings all of the others into play, but it's the signature course. So I just wanted to have that. And if you just scroll down just a little bit more, and right there, Lone had it. Tires screeching, plates breaking, hail pounding on the shed tin roof, persons sniping. And, that's how he was experiencing life. And whatever way you want to, there are other ways in which to do it, but that's how Lone was experiencing. And I'm going, there's no need to have tires screeching. There's no need to break plates. Let's stay found and let's enjoy ourselves.
Should I keep going?
I think if we do, then I would go over, if we go back up to the navigation bar and we hit awareness and just click the main one. Yeah. This is my legacy project for the rest of my life. It's a quarterly publication about the connection between awareness and forests. And how do I collect stories to write books? I'm just waiting on Amazon to give me the go-ahead to start working with the latest book I put up. It's called Awareness from Forests. In other words, how do forests help us gain awareness of living? And this is just the preliminary work to get it going. That was one of the first diagrams that I drew about awareness. And thinking about it, you can see the front view walking and the background and time and what happens behind the trees. I've been working on this for many, 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 many years. But this is an invitation I extend, is if anyone has a tree story, an idea or something like that, then I would love to put it in awareness from forests, for forests, through forests. These will be a quarterly publication. And so this is where very much my wholeheartedness comes out. Every 3 months, there will be a book coming out.
It's very interesting. Congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, just waiting for Amazon to go, yep, it's up, it's ready to go. And I'm on my third day. So is the email in yet? Is the email in yet?
We know that feeling, don't we? The power they have.
Yeah.
I'm just noticing the time. We actually are out of time, so I'm going to stop sharing unless there's anything else here. How about contact?
Well, the contact form that's there, just a simple, name, email, whatever it is you'd like to share. Maybe you want to ask a question, leave a comment. Hey, I even appreciate funnies. If you got a joke, put it in here and send it to me.
Fantastic. So, Stephen, for people who want to reach out to you, they want to work with you, they want to just pick your brain, who would you like to contact you, and what's the best way for them to do that?
The fastest way is actually to go to the website and go to the contact form, send it with whatever it is that you're looking for, question, comment, funny, whatever it is. That is the fastest way to get to me, because that drops right into my email box and take it from there. And then that way you get to visit the website as well.
Fantastic. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you with us, and hopefully you'll come back on some of our other shows as well.
Sure.
I have one last question before we leave today, and it has to be asked. What is your favorite tree?
My favorite tree at this point in time is an alder. It's a pioneer tree. It's in a little bit more of a wet area. It's what holds the soils together. It starts to do the nitrogen fixing. It's one of those pioneer trees, and it's down in here. And there's a couple of places where they've created an arch. So I think of that as I walk through the archway of the alders as an older becoming an elder. AOE.
Great conversation there. I really loved it.
Well, thank you. It was really great being with you.
Worth getting up early, right, Red?
Yes, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. I'm still a little I'm not going to say as fast as I normally am, but give me about another 2 hours. I'll be fine for another 12. So it's a matter of gradually working my way into the pace that I want to be safely.
For sure.
Red, what's the best way for people to reach out to you, and who would you like to contact you?
My best way to reach me is through my website. My contact information is my phone number and my email. Those are my two preferred methods. redolaughlin.com. That's red like the color, R-E-D, O'Laughlin, O-L-A-U-G-H-L-I-N. So it's redolaughlin.com. And you can reach me, either just pick up the phone and give me a call or send me an email. I can help people either through speaking. Like I said, I talk on a variety of topics, all dealing with age-related issues, longevity. And if you have any questions about a book, think about writing something, more than happy to talk to you about that with regard to how do you do it, what makes sense, and to get the book published. And those are the things that I can help you with. Thank you, Dr. JACALYN.
Thank you, Red. And thank you both for being here today. And thank you for people who are watching or listening live or on the replay. We will be replaying this show later today, as well as the rest of the week. Yes, Red.
And would you spell out Dr. Stevens' website just so that people who are on the audio are, because it's wealth, but not the way we spell wealth.
Absolutely. It's WELL, like well, THMOVEMENT.com.
Yeah.
All right. We are coming right back with our next show, which is called Hot Topics. So stay tuned. Dr. Stephen Hobbs, thanks again for being here with us.
Thank you, Dr. JACALYN. Thank you, Red.
Bye, everyone.
Bye now.
Bye.